On August 11, 1999, a storm struck Salt Lake City that meteorologists didn't even think was possible. A tornado, tearing straight through downtown, in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. In less than 10 minutes, it destroyed lives, leveled buildings, and proved that nature does not play by our rules. This wasn't Kansas. This wasn't Oklahoma. This was Utah, a place most believed was untouchable by such a storm. And yet, the impossible happened. This is the story of the most unexpected tornado in U.S. history. To understand why this storm shocked not only Utah but the entire country, you need to know one thing. Utah averages about 2 tornadoes a year, most of them weak, short-lived, and in open rural areas. And never, not once in modern history, had a powerful tornado struck the heart of Salt Lake City. It was considered nearly impossible. But all of that changed on one calm Wednesday afternoon in August. At first, the skies looked harmless. A little cloudy, a little humid, but nothing to worry about. People were on lunch breaks, shopping, heading to meetings, or strolling through the streets of downtown. But above the mountains, something far more dangerous was brewing. High above the city, the atmosphere was quietly boiling. A mass of cool, dry air had swept down from the northwest. At the same time, warm, moist air was trapped around the Great Salt Lake. These two air masses clashed, feeding instability into the sky. Thunderstorms began to grow, darkening the horizon. Most dismissed it as a typical summer storm. But meteorologists watching radar noticed something strange. The storm cells were rotating. By 12:40 p.m., the atmosphere aligned in exactly the wrong way. And then the unthinkable happened. It began as a thin funnel cloud descending from a thunderstorm just north of downtown. At first, people didn't understand what they were seeing. Some thought it was a trick of the clouds. Others pulled out cameras, snapping photos of the strange formation, unaware that within seconds it would turn deadly. The funnel stretched downward, snaking toward the ground, until it finally touched down near the Utah State Fairgrounds. And the moment it made contact, the atmosphere exploded into chaos. The tornado rapidly grew in size and strength. Within moments, it had transformed into a roaring F2 twister, with winds reaching up to 150 miles per hour. Dust, debris, and shattered pieces of buildings were pulled into its swirling core as it carved a path directly toward downtown. And this wasn't Tornado Alley, where sirens blare and families know to rush to basements. Salt Lake City had no widespread tornado siren system, no culture of tornado drills, and few homes built with storm shelters. People had no warning, no preparation, and most didn't even realize what was happening until the funnel was already on top of them. The tornado struck with brutal force. The Utah State Fair Park was its first victim, as barns, booths, and steel beams were ripped apart and twisted into piles of wreckage. Warehouses nearby were shredded as if by a giant's hand, their roofs peeled away, their walls collapsing like cardboard. Cars were tossed into the air, smashing down into streets and parking lots. And then, the twister set its sights on the Delta Center, the home of the Utah Jazz basketball team. Within seconds, the arena was under siege. Massive sheets of metal peeled away from the roof, curling into the sky. Windows shattered, raining glass onto the streets below where pedestrians were running for their lives. Concrete shook as pieces of debris slammed into walls and doors. The building barely held together, but the surrounding blocks weren't so lucky. Office buildings downtown had their windows sucked out and hurled like blades through the air, slicing into anything in their path. And then came the moment of tragedy that still haunts survivors. Near the massive LDS Conference Center, a construction site stood directly in the path of the storm. Workers had no time to escape. Scaffolding crumpled like paper as the tornado roared through. Heavy equipment was lifted, flipped, and thrown. One worker was killed instantly when a steel beam collapsed. Others were badly injured, some thrown across the site, others struck by wooden planks flying like missiles. For those on the ground, it felt like the world was ending. Chaos filled the streets. Alarms blared. Power lines snapped and sparked. People screamed and scattered, running blindly through clouds of dust and flying debris. Trees were ripped from their roots, their trunks hurled into cars and homes. In some places, the air was so thick with debris that survivors described it as breathing smoke made of wood, glass, and dirt. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. In less than 10 minutes, the tornado lifted back into the clouds. The winds calmed, the dust settled, and the city was left in stunned silence. What remained looked like the aftermath of a bombing. A path of destruction 4 miles long and 300 yards wide carved straight through the capital of Utah. Entire blocks looked shredded. Historic landmarks stood in ruins. Across Liberty Park, more than 1,000 trees were uprooted, some centuries old, now lying like broken matchsticks. What made this storm extraordinary wasn't just the destruction, but the rarity. Salt Lake City was never supposed to be vulnerable. This wasn't supposed to happen. Meteorologists around the country called it a once-in-a-thousand-years event. Even seasoned storm chasers, veterans who had chased tornadoes across Tornado Alley, could hardly believe what they were seeing when they arrived. A tornado in downtown Salt Lake City? They said. That's impossible. But it wasn't. The official toll was devastating. 1 dead, more than 80 injured, and an estimated $170 million in damages. But for Utah residents, the true cost wasn't measured in dollars. It was psychological. The belief that it can't happen here was shattered forever. People walked through the wreckage in shock. Some carried children, others dug through rubble, searching for belongings. Families returned to their homes only to find roofs torn off, walls collapsed, and years of memories scattered across muddy streets. Emergency services were overwhelmed. With no tornado sirens, many people said they didn't even realize it was a tornado until it was too late. Firefighters, police, and medical workers scrambled to respond, navigating blocked roads, downed power lines, and dangerous debris. Hospitals filled with the injured, cuts from flying glass, broken bones from collapsing walls, and shock from the sheer terror of what they had endured. The following days revealed the full extent of the destruction. Power was out for thousands. Roads were impassable. Entire neighborhoods looked as though a war had torn through them. And yet, even in the middle of devastation, something else emerged: resilience. Neighbors helped neighbors. Volunteers poured into the streets with chainsaws, food, and water. Church groups organized shelters. Communities rebuilt, even as they struggled to process what had happened. The 1999 Salt Lake City tornado is remembered as one of the most shocking and unexpected natural disasters in American history. It proved a chilling truth: nature does not follow our rules. Geography does not guarantee safety. And rarity does not mean impossible. Every city, no matter where it is, must be prepared for the unthinkable. Because if a tornado can strike Salt Lake City in the shadow of the Rockies, then it can strike anywhere. The Salt Lake City tornado lasted less than 10 minutes. But in that short span, it rewrote the rules of weather history. It left scars not just on the city's skyline, but on its people's hearts and minds. Survivors say they will never forget the sound, the roar of the wind, the scream of shattering glass, the thud of debris slamming into buildings. They will never forget the feeling of disbelief, looking up at a funnel cloud twisting through the city where no tornado was ever supposed to be. So now imagine yourself there, standing in downtown Salt Lake City, looking up as the sky darkens and a funnel cloud drops from the storm above. Would you have believed it? Would you have run? Or would you have stood frozen, watching the impossible unfold before your eyes? That day in 1999, thousands of Utah residents had to answer that question for themselves. And their city, and their understanding of nature, has never been the same since.